Today, I want to talk a little bit about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Just about everyone is familiar with this fairy tale from Disney's cartoon. So I don't think we need to go into the nuts and bolts of the fairy tale itself. Let's just start with a more psychological analysis of what is going on. But can you please describe when you were first introduced to Snow White?
I was very small when my parents read Snow White to me, and I became quite concerned about how can a stepmother do that to a child. Even psychologists now seem to disagree that this is in any way upsetting or could possibly be harmful, but I remember distinctly that it bothered me that somebody could be so struck by their own beauty that they would have to destroy either their child or stepchild.
Don't you think this serves as a good warning for children what not to do as they grow up?
I think in Snow White's, in the story, it's quite clear that the child had no control over becoming more beautiful as she got older, and the mother or stepmother was simply unable to accept the age difference and the maturity and the difference in development, that the mother would have to face a lesser beauty as she gets older, and the child would definitely grow up and become more beautiful.
This is, though, the nature of human life. This is something that happens again and again, and in fact, in modern society, it's common to see people struggling against signs of aging.
This is true, and this is why it seems very educational also to parents, is accept who you are at whatever age level you are, and don't try to bring back something you cannot get back, not with money or powders or creams.
What do you think about the character of the mirror? The mirror is actually something that's alive in the fairy tale. What does that represent to you?
The mirror is very much like a conscience outside of yourself. When the stepmother picked up the mirror, she wanted reassurance. In other words, she was unable to perceive herself for her value. She was only concerned with what showed to other people.
But if you think about the character of Snow White, she actually didn't do anything positive to earn her position. It was purely related on beauty. What does that say to you of how it works in the fairy tale?
Snow White represents the innocence, the beauty of innocence, the development, the being unaware that she is a threat to somebody. Nowhere in any of the versions did it speak about Snow White being at all concerned about her looks, where with the stepmother it was almost like a daily activity that she needed reassurance that she is the best, she is the most beautiful. And it is not uncommon for people to have that feeling, to have not necessarily their own beauty, but to have the biggest house and the biggest car and the most money and the nicest shoes, and it is an unhealthy competition.
Do you have any concrete examples for that in cases you've dealt with?
Yes, I have, particularly people that see they are high achievers, and as long as they have something else that they need to achieve, things are going well. But once they have reached every goal that they have set for themselves, many of them become extremely depressed and even can become suicidal because there is no other avenue and no other gain. and particularly when you are looking at women more than men, when beauty fades, this is often extremely difficult for people to accept.
So is the fairy tale basically pointing out that the queen should have set her sights on something else?
Very much so, because nowhere in the fairy tale do you see or hear anything that she is doing to help anybody else, to do anything for a household, for a person, for an animal, or even have any interests. And again, in psychology, if the only concern is your beauty or your life, it's not permanent.
What do you think about the characters of the dwarves? Now, of course, Walt Disney magnified those characters in his cartoon, but the dwarves in the fairy tale also have some role to play. What do you think about their role?
In different versions, they have different roles. In some versions, they are cantankerous and they're complaining that Snow White is not cleaning for them. In other versions, you see that they're very pleased with what Snow White is doing. She's cooking for them and she's making their beds. And again, they come through as very different people. And some of them even, they are heroic. And in others, they are sort of subhuman. Again, in psychological evaluations, you could kind of plug in, you could change a story if you're telling it to a child and make them be whatever you would like for your child to understand of what they are.
Now, as a final point, many times people make fun of fairy tales because they say, well, it's all about a happy ending. And that in itself is bad for children to understand, that things have a happy ending. What do you think about that?
I think in a story such as Snow White, it needs a happy ending because it is actually quite threatening to a child of what can happen if you are, out in the woods and you're dumped there and your stepmother wants you dead and there are strangers that are taking care of you. I think it is necessary when you present threats that you have to present resolution.
Thank you very much.